friends. First of all, I'm Roger Silverman, and I'm chairing today's meeting. Welcome to the latest discussion forum of the campaign for a mass workers' party. When we first launched our campaign, the idea of a new mass workers' party was ridiculed as futile, preposterous, because let's remind comrades, it's only a few months ago most left activists were still in despair at years of endless prevarications, delays, squabbles, and the very dream of a new party or left seemed to many just beyond our grasp. But we said politics, like history, abhors a vacuum. Reality demands the creation of a new party. And we were proved right when, within days of an almost accidental and unexpected proclamation out of the blue of an intention to found a new party, attracted 800,000 potential sign-ups within days. And last week, a founding conference was held. Something was achieved. But we have to say, before we go on to the positive, that the whole scenario so far could almost have come out of the pages of Alice in Wonderland or been scripted for a Monty Python sketch. Two rival membership portals were established. There were actual threats of legal proceedings and judicial intervention. A third of the self-appointed interim leadership resigned on the eve of the conference. Delegates themselves at the conference were chosen at random by lottery. The presumed leader was manifestly opposed to the very idea of founding a new party and had to be virtually dragged to the conference hall. The presumed alternative leader boycotted the first day of the conference. In the end, against the platform, it was agreed to do without a leader altogether. People were expelled at the last minute for breaking the rules before any rules had been adopted. The whole scene would have looked hilarious if the stakes were not so high. But they are. They're deadly serious. The farce of the ludicrously named, in my opinion, your party is no joke. We're reliving the horrors of the 1930s, a time of civil wars and genocide. Along with practically the whole of Europe and most of the world, we're heading towards the nightmare of an extreme far-right government, soon to be joined by the last remaining other holdouts on the continent, France and Germany. 150,000 fascists recently marched through London, financed by the world's first trillionaire. The ruling class is openly and explicitly preparing for world war. But there is hope. This messy newborn baby can still learn to walk and talk and grow. We still have cause for hope, and that hope is justified by the bold, decisive steps agreed by 2,000 plus rank and file delegates, albeit picked at random, who asserted their rights to seize the opportunity out of the hands of a quavering and bickering clique to shape the party according to their own estimation of the needs of the day. And at this meeting, this will give us an opportunity to join in the discussions that are obviously raging all around the country on how we can help this new party to develop a proper foundation. And to help us do that, we're very privileged to have Comrade Naomi Wimborne Idrissi, who's been an absolutely determined fighter for the cause of the creation of a proper, healthy, democratic, and militant workers' party in this country. So I hand over to you, Naomi.
Oh, thanks, Roger, for that somewhat apocalyptic but probably accurate depiction of the state we're in. It's funny when you were talking about the newborn baby. I've just got to tell you, I'm a governor of a little school in the village where I live, and I went this afternoon to see Key Stage 1 do their nativity. Nobody over the age of 7, bumbling around, doing the actions, forgetting the actions, not remembering their parts. It was hilarious, and it did rather remind me of your party conference in a way. Anyway, enough frivolities. I'm going to be a little bit lazy because the platform for Democratic Party that Eric and I are in with Ken Loach and Ian Hodson and Audrey White and a handful of other excellent comrades have put out a bulletin which I have sent to Roger, and hopefully you'll be able to circulate it to you. But it forms a pretty good framework for our discussion, I think. So if we look at what went on at the weekend, well, we know that your party, and I think lots of us agree that the name is not going to be very helpful for the future, but that's what we got for the moment, was officially founded on the 29th or 30th of November. There were about 2,000 plus party members there. A few who weren't sortitians somehow snuck in. We weren't asked too many questions about how that happened. And of course, there was voting undertaken by several thousand more members who weren't present, who were able to access it via online voting system, which was quite impressive, really. I mean, if you just treated this as a bit fun, it was quite entertaining, really, being able to vote in. I wasn't there, I was somewhere else. And what we are now, I mean, if we've got 50,000 plus members, then we are, the biggest party of the left that there's been since the Communist Party in the 1940s. So it's quite something to celebrate. Zara Sultana, who has played a quite controversial role, but I think most of us think a largely positive one in dragging this baby into the open air out of the womb. She had a very successful Friday night meeting, so a pre-conference rally, which kind of set the tone for a lot of the active actions by people who wanted to defy the clique, which had been running things in such a dysfunctional manner. And it was successful. She inspired people to go into the conference with determination, with confidence, and largely encouraged, I must say, by us in the platform for Democratic Party, put out a sort of some voting guides for people, like voting for collective leadership rather than sole leadership, which I think is very important, because it means that, thank goodness, we do not have the prospect of a destructive head-to-head battle between Zara and Jeremy for leader of the party, which would have been a very unpleasant prospect, I think. It doesn't mean that we're not out of the woods, because what we may have, if we're not careful, is a battle to the death between Team Zara and Team Jeremy for domination of the new collective leadership. And that's something I think we want to talk about, trying to avoid. It's a horrific prospect. So there were two speakers for our little platform at Zara's meeting who stressed the vital importance of transparency, democracy, and accountability, which I think most people at this gathering here this evening recognise as being incredibly important and largely absent from the process which led to the stage we're at, thanks to the domination of a bureaucratic clique, with Jeremy as their figurehead. And he's not blameless in it either. It's not one of those situations when you can say, oh dear, he's poorly advised. Jeremy should know what's going on and behave differently, in our view. These things, transparency, democracy, accountability, are not like optional add-ons. They have to be fundamental to this new party from the grassroots up. And I think that's where we all have a role to play, because what we need to do now is build the branches, build from the ground up, not waiting for permission, for official sanction before getting to work mobilizing with those socialists in our areas that we can reach. I mean, some people have actually managed to get hold of their data for their area from from your party HQ. Most people haven't, and that's obviously something that we've got to fight for, to make that happen as soon as possible. Right at the beginning of conference, we were presented with some challenges. There were standing orders which pretty well prevented anybody from raising any matters of, you couldn't suspend standing orders because they were kind of just imposed. And of course, there was the scandal of members of the Socialist Workers' Party receiving emails in the middle of the night before conference even started, saying that they had been expelled. And as Roger hinted, this was something that was done before the rules about the basis on which somebody may or may not be expelled had even been discussed by the membership. So it was shocking overreach by Carrie and her clique. And it actually played into the hands of the people who are campaigning for democracy because it was so outrageous. And I think that tragically, it kind of helped in a way. The question of Zara boycotting the first day, I mean, what happened was she turned up with her little team, and one of them was barred from entering on the grounds that there was some sort of ICO inquiry that he was involved in, which is apparently not the case. I don't know the details exactly, and he was allowed back in later. So what did we succeed in? Well, we did manage to get through the vote of the membership who took part, socialism and the central role of the working class in the party's founding statement. So that's obviously really important. It was agreed that the party should mobilise around struggles for Palestine liberation, anti-racism, trans rights, basically the struggles for all oppressed peoples. For an elected collective leadership on the basis of one member, one vote, which I've already mentioned, the immediate establishment of branches, giving them autonomy in their actions, for dual membership, which means that things like expelling members of the SWP should not happen. So any plans for a witch hunt should have been stopped in their tracks by that vote. And very important support for anti-austerity, so no cut budgets in local government. So that was all positive. There were serious attempts to block proper debate. There were far too many speakers wheeled out. I'm sure some of the talks were quite interesting. I haven't yet heard from the speaker from the Belgian Workers' Party. I would like to hear that. But the fact that there were a number of speakers on the platform taking up time, which was really desperately needed for debate on the issues of the day. I mean, we were there to found a new party and we did need to get on with that, really. It has been launched. I think the chairing was execrable from what I could see on the live stream. I don't know if people who are actually on the floor may have a different impression, but it looked as if many of the chairs were completely at sea and there was too much cutting off of people for allegedly not sticking to the motion or amendment that they were meant to be speaking to. And there were some pretty shouty, unsympathetic speeches as well, which I think probably put off a lot of people. Anyway, there were democratic gains, no doubt about it. And our job, I think, is to get back into our localities and make those gains a reality. They can't just be words on paper. So, but this means developing the ideas of socialist struggle and so on in our communities in day-to-day activism, making the party relevant to people in their own lives, because that's where we're going to confront the ideas which are giving ground to reform. It's going to be right there in our grassroots movements. So obviously the party has yet to formulate a program which could be used in elections, and that's going to be a big battle coming up, and I do want to talk about that in a minute. From our platform's point of view, we urge your party members to engage urgently with establishing strong local branches, democratically organised, get going as soon as possible. I mean, in the new year, it should be possible to get hold of the data that has been assembled, and there should be access to funds. And the conference agreed that we should have 50% of funds should go to fork branches for their formation. I would say also the issue of accessibility came up a lot. And I think it's important that, see, some people use the fact that for people with a range of disabilities, sitting at home and voting online is easy and comfortable, but it's also isolating, and it's a kind of democratic deficiency to have people who aren't actively engaged in branches. I think it's going to be important for branches. This is my personal idea. I haven't really discussed it with anybody else. For branches to build accessibility in hybrid meetings. Anyway, just bringing people physically to meetings if they have to be in person and so on. I think we have to build it in and not go overboard with the idea that 50,000 members, or hopefully more members, will just sit home and vote on proposals that they've had not much part in discussing and formulating. That's one of my personal ideas. So we've got to be grounded, we've got to be involved in working class struggles, housing struggles, campaigns for Palestine, anti-racism, all those campaigns that we've talked about over the last many months, getting ready for local elections in May 2026, and of course, Scottish and Welsh Holyrood and Senate elections as well. I think people will have noticed that there's a new initiative called We Are Together, which is mobilising for a national march against the far right on March 28th. We would suggest that that should be something that your party should actively take up and support. And we've got to organise for the CEC, the Central Executive Committee, which is going to be the new collective leadership. How on earth this is going to work, I do not know. There will be 16 people elected on a regional basis. And they will be collectively responsible for leading the party once they are elected in the January-February period. This is going to require a hell of a lot of thinking and comradely collaboration. It's a big ask, isn't it? So I can tell you that there are lots of discussions going on in many. Before the meeting started, I was joking about the digital equivalent of smoke-filled rooms. There are lots of different forums, there are lots of different sects, there are lots of different factions, and they all have their own approaches. There are draft platforms going around, draft programs that people will be asked to sign up to in order to get the endorsement of a particular slate. Our view is that we need to make this process as unifying as possible. So as I said at the beginning, we've averted the danger of having a very unseemly battle head-to-head, Jeremy versus Zara, but there is a danger that we will have two opposing slates. And there are people who are hopefully acceptable to Jeremy, who are also good comrades who the rest of us would want to support. We have to identify those people, and we have to bring to the fore grassroots activists who may not be very well known, but who have good reputations in their area, who are well grounded, who are dependable socialists of principle, who can be trusted, who will abide by rules requiring full transparency and accountability. People who will have the confidence of the broader your party membership, not just of a particular sect who are trying to organise their own slate. This is going to be a big challenge. And the question of programme, I think we do have to discuss this. I don't know if any of you had a look at Counterfire's meeting last night, where they had Tariq Ali speaking, Salma Yaqub, I think very highly of, Michael Lafollette. Who else? Anyway, those were three very important people. And Tariq made a very good point when he said, comrades, we are not in a revolutionary period. We are in a period where the right is stronger than we've seen it, as Roger said in his introduction, since before the Second World War. We really are on the back foot. We are weak. The right wing is ascendant. So if we think that we're going to put out a maximalist sort of Leninist program and the masses will arise and overturn the capitalist order because we asked them to, we are really living in cloud cuckoo land. And some of the programs that are being proposed look a bit like that to me. Obviously, there are issues that are really controversial. I mean, I'm anti-Zionist to my bones, but I don't necessarily think that we should go out on the streets saying, "Vote for us and we will expel the Israeli ambassador." I'm not sure that that's a vote winner. We can have these principles as part of our extended program, but whether they should be the prerequisite for standing to become leaders of your party, I'm not so sure. And I may be accused of being a sort of conciliatory soft left or something for saying that. There are other issues, and I'm sure you can guess what I'm alluding to, that are going to be very controversial along those lines. So I think it's important that we we don't wait for instructions from above anymore. People pick up and run the democratic gains that we won in Liverpool, get building in those branches, run education sessions, do social activities that will engage new people, educate each other, learn through all the struggles and campaigns that are going on. And hopefully we can build a strong and united organisation which will carry weight in our communities up and down the country and also be able to act effectively in elections. I think I'll leave it there and let's see where we go with the discussion. We've got lots of great people here, so I'll stop there. Thank you, Roger.
Well, thank you very much, Naomi.